Namaste. Our today topic is heat model of the mind part 2. Last episode we discussed heat model of the mind and its background perspective. Today we'll discuss how this heat model of the mind works actually in operations. For this we have with us our psychoanalysis consultant Mr. Himanshu Vaidya.
Namaste.
Namaste. Mr. Himanshu Vaidya, can we start with some sharing on how is your heat model of the mind structurally constituted?
Psychoanalysis has two popular models of the mind, one by Freud, one by Jung. However, both Freud and Jung were within the paradigm of modernity, Freud conforming to modernity, Jung revolting against modernity. Yet, both of them had one thing in common. Their model of the mind essentially was the mind of an isolated individual. The heat model of the mind, by contrast, is a model of the mind which is located in an ecosystem. The ecosystem of society, history, and spirituality. The heat model of the mind, therefore, has two parts. The part which is inside the individual and part which is outside the individual. Because the way the mind functions within the individual is inevitably influenced by something which is coming from outside the individual. So that also has to be factored in. So let us start with what is the inside of the individual, and then we look at the outside and see structurally how the whole system is. We start with the self or the psychic or the coordinator, whatever you call. If you are a believer, you can call it the soul or the psychic. If you are a non-believer, you can call it the self or the coordinator. But that center of the psyche is something where we start with. After that, now that center coordinator or the soul is the coordinator for the whole psyche. And if you are a believer, then this also is the soul which travels from one incarnation to the other. Next to it is the karmic element. After that is the yin and yang, the masculine and the feminine. After that is a layer of what I call the motivational elementals, or in simple word, the layer of desires, which is the layer also of the chakras as we know in the East, because each chakra is home to some specific desires. Muladhara is home to the desire of survival, faculties of anger and fear. The Swadhisthana is the center for sexual desires. The Manipur is a center for power desires. The heart for emotional desires. The Agnya Chakra for desires related to knowledge. The Vishuddha Chakra related to arts. And the Sahasrara Chakra related to mysticism and spirituality. So we have the soul or the psychic, the karmic element, then third is the yin and yang, then a layer of chakras or desires, and this layer I call the layer of motivational elementals. Then next you have the faculty elementals, and we will see how the two of them relate when we go into the operation of it. So you have the motivational elemental, then you have the faculty elemental, then you have the collective unconscious, then you have the personal unconscious, then you have the conscious, and in the conscious is the psychological ego, the personality ego, which is slightly different from the Freudian ego. and also slightly different from the Jungian ego, but very close to the Jungian ego. So this is how structurally the whole thing is. Two important elements, which are awareness and feel, are amorphously spread across the psyche. So they are not consolidated in terms of an entity. They are spread across the whole of the psyche. The elemental of awareness and the elemental of feel. This is how the inside of the structural part of the psyche is within the man. Now, just as one person has this inside, the other person who is next to him also has the same kind of structure inside. So his parents, his family members, his neighbors, his friends, and the society at large, they also have the same kind of psychic structure. And every psychic structure has a deterministic element and a free willing element. So this person also has a free will, and that person also has a free will. And exercise of free will from that person also influences the mind of this person. Now, this is the inside, and the outside we saw one person. Now, outside also is society with its own inequalities, with its own political realities, its own power realities, its own history, its own opportunities and constraints. So there is a society outside, and the psyche has to develop in the context of that society. So this psyche has its own karma, and that society also has its own karma and its own free will. Okay. Now, the this psyche, when we talk of the psyche, this individual psyche, which is in relation to the family and the society, is also a part of history. If it was born in a particular time, its inevitable growth is of a particular kind. Somebody is born in 15th century, the kind of growth he has in the first 25 years, and a person born today and the growth he has in the first 25 years are very different. So the historical process and the time where you are born is also important for the insight to be created in a particular way. And then we come to the point that we are in life not only for settling the account of karma, which is a small part of it, but also to have new experiences which have nothing to do with karma, which have to do with free will and our own program of life. And this, our own program of life, comes from, which is partly unique to us and partly is in congruence with what I call the principle, which is the ground of the universe, which has a broad program for the universe, just as our self has a broad program for our life. And the program for our life is in sync with the program of the universe in some ways which we completely don't understand. So this is how the heat model of the mind places the individual's model of the mind in connection with the society, history, and the spiritual ground of the universe. So the universe is seen as having a purpose, a broad structure in which the human free will can make incremental changes but not very fundamental changes. So this is the way the structure of the human mind is, and it is not a model of the mind of the isolated individual. It is a psycho, socio, philosophico, spiritual model of the mind. And therefore all these elements come and get factored in when we try to explain the working of that mind. Now, here we are looking at history with a purpose. History is not on a morning walk. It is going somewhere. That somewhere is a purpose. And in that purpose, the individual finds his own small purpose. And that is not something the individual works out consciously. It is there inside of him, which by and large it discovers rather than invents. So this is how structurally the heat model of the mind is.
What are the functional entities which are at work in this structure?
Because the heat model of the mind tries to understand everything in very elemental terms, as fundamental terms as possible. It is like saying, if you want to understand the substance, you can understand at the macro level, molecular level, atomic level, and the subatomic level. The more fundamental you go, the better and more precise knowledge you have. So the heat model of the mind is an elemental model of the mind where we want to understand the mind in as uh, deeper fundamentals as possible. So what I have done is I have created 7 sets of elementals. The first set of elementals is the structural elementals and 6 sets of functional elementals. The structural elementals are what we saw in the last question: the psychic, the karmic layer, the yin and yang, the motivational elementals, the faculty elementals, the uh, collective unconscious, the personal unconscious, and the conscious, and that in that the ego. And then on one side, the principle of the universe, on the other side, society and history, and the individual with his free will situated in this ecosystem. Now, the 6 categories of functional elementals are like this. First, we start with desire. So the first set of elementals are motivational elementals, right? Like survival, sexuality, sense pleasure, power, emotions, love, belongingness, arts, creativity, knowledge, and mysticism and spirituality. So they become the types of desires, what I call the motivational elementals. Then you have the faculty elementals. Now, faculty elementals can get activated after the motivational elementals are activated in a particular way. For example, I put here 2 new variables, functional variables: affinity and life energy. Life energy is as typically understood in the Eastern sciences, prana or life energy, whatever you call. But affinity is a new concept, which is not in the East. This affinity means, let us say, uh, a desire is activated. Let us say desire for power is activated. Based upon the quantum of activation of that desire, some quantum of affinity is put upon it. Now imagine this affinity like a magnet, that just as magnet pulls towards itself the iron nails or any form of metal, similarly affinity pulls towards itself life energy. So there is life energy in the body, based upon which desire wants to use life energy at a particular point. Life energy is pulled towards that desire. And across 24 hours, desires keep switching. When we are hungry, we have desire for food. Then we have desire to see television. Then we have desire to talk with friends. So desires keep changing based upon what is the active desire. Whatever desire activates, on that affinity gets deposited. And this is like a magnet which pulls life energy towards it. Once life energy is pulled towards it, then that life energy goes and uh, activates a faculty elemental, which is thought or imagination. So first we have the motivational elementals, Then we have these two operational variables. Then we have the faculty elementals. Because the desire, before it is satisfied, you have to think out whether to satisfy or not and how to satisfy. And after the faculty elementals are used, the action takes place. And after the action, the resultant elementals happen. If you are satisfied, satisfaction happens, or dissatisfaction happens, or if you are extremely dissatisfied, anger happens, frustration happens, envy happens, your destructive rage happens. All of those are results of your effort and pleasure. So they I call as resultant elementals. And all negative effects that we talk about, anger, fear, pain, guilt, shame, envy, narcissism, abandonment, rejection, all of them are resultant elementals. They can be positive also, they can be negative also. And then we have the accumulating elementals, which means from this experience you learn something and a new template or a schema is formed, which is used for future reference. So that I call as accumulating elementals. The core of it is learning and template formation. So you have this motivational elementals, the faculty elementals, sorry, motivational elementals, the process elementals of life, energy, and affinity. Then you have the faculty elementals of thinking and imagination. And you also have one more category, the characteristic elementals, which are like catalysts, like hope, positivity, cheerfulness, which influence the way you evaluate something. And then you have the resultant elementals and the accumulating elementals. So this is how, in terms of elementals, the psychological process is depicted. So this is how the functional component of the model is there.
Okay. How does the operation actually happen, Himanshuji?
Let us say it is 4 o'clock and you start having desire for a cup of tea. And let us apply this model to that process. So it is 4 o'clock and the desire to have a cup of tea activates in you. So first point is, how is the desire activating? So I have put out a list of factors through which we can understand why a desire is activated. In your case, it will be the biological clock, that every day 4 o'clock you drink tea. So the biological clock will maintain that memory, and at 4 o'clock it will create that desire. So because of the habit or the biological clock, the desire is activated. Based upon the strength of the desire, suppose you have not taken any cup of tea from the morning, it will be very strong. If you have taken 5 cups of tea, it will be less. Based upon the intensity, the quantum of affinity will be deposited over it. Based upon that affinity, the quantum of life energy will be drawn. And this will then use the faculty elementals of thought and imagination to find out where will you get a cup of tea, which is the best place, where is the taste and the price the best. So you think it through, and then action happens. After you decide, the action happens. After the action, you have resultant elementals. Whether you are satisfied, will you come again to the same tea stall? Will you learn a lesson and say, never again, I won't come here again? Will you fight with the person? You are so angry, give me my money back, the tea was very bad. So those are resultant elementals. After the action is over, what is the result of that action? And they will be used for future reference. Okay. So it is the same for pathology also. That when we talk of pathology also, say for example, secondary narcissism, right? The desire is activated to have a very strong relationship with the mother by virtue of the instinct of the person. It is the instinct which activates that desire. So the desire is activated, activation is very strong, huge amount of affinity is put into it, life energy drawn towards it. Some thought happens very quickly and the person goes towards the mother. After the action, huge frustration happens and the person decides never again. And secondary narcissism starts where the resultant elemental is the template of secondary narcissism. So this is how we can look at it as an example of how we can see this model functioning.
Okay. You just talked about the elemental analysis of psychological phenomena. Can you give some more example and explain this?
Yes, uh, it does many things. One of the things it does is it takes us into more elemental analysis, and I think I have started the process. The model is still not complete. It has some developmental uh, aspects to still cover, but whenever the model is, let me share this. Uh, Let us say about pathology. If we say that a large amount of pathology is because of repressed affect, negative affect, then let us go into the core of it. How does it happen? So if we take affect based pathology, that there is a pathology because of bottled up negative affect, and by that I think we would be covering almost 40 to 50% of all problems, because a large category of problems is because of bottled up negative affect. The negative affect may be anger, it may be pain, it may be guilt, it may be shame, it may be envy. Essentially, it's a negative affect bottled up. So it proposes a system of looking at it, what I call the affect life cycle. And it has these components. First, affect generation, then affect regulation, and then symptom formation. So how do we go into affect regulation, affect generation? With risk, two people are subject to the same kind of event. One generates huge amount of affect, the other person generates moderate amount of affect, which means the first phase of affect generation, we have to go into details in terms of elementals. What are the elementals involved? So I have made a list of those elementals. The primary uh, entities there are sensitivity, life energy, and the evaluation system. So first you evaluate that phenomena, and then for every unit evaluation, how much of sensitivity is generated, and to back up that sensitivity, how much of life energy is sucked in by the affinity. So if the sensitivity is high and the life energy is high, affect generation is going to be high. Now if affect generation itself is low, the chances that any problem will develop automatically go low. Then we have the second stage, affect regulation. Suppose high amount of affect gets generated, but the regulatory system is very good. So part of the affect is expressed, part of the affect is sublimated, part of the affect, right, is repressed successfully. Then there is nothing intolerable about it, and therefore no symptom will be created. But if the affect regulation system is not good enough, the affect generated cannot be expressed out, cannot be sublimated, cannot be repressed enough, and therefore there will be excess negative affect which is completely free, which cannot be dealt with by defenses, and that will get into symptom formation. So in each of the phases, this model goes into how affect generation happens, how affect regulation happens, how symptom formation happens. That is one way this goes into elementals. The second way it goes into elementals is this. It brings in epistemology into psychoanalysis. For example, the German philosopher Immanuel Kant made a very good study of how the mind thinks, what he used to call the biology of thought. So he would say that first the stimulus comes. If I see this bottle in front of me, first the stimulus comes from here onto my eyes, and many stimuli come. All of them get coordinated in the brain, and therefore I distinguish stimulus coming from here versus stimulus coming from here. So right now I am seeing you, that is a different stimulus, and I am seeing this also, this is different stimulus. So this package of stimulus is separately interpreted. This package of stimulus is separately interpreted. There is some coordinator inside who separates one package of stimulus from the other. So he says the stimuli are acted upon, segregated, collected, interpreted in terms of sensation. Sensation is then converted into perception, perception into conception, and conception into knowledge. So he made a line of how any psychological process happens, regardless of whether it's a cognitive process or an affective process. So what is philosophy classically called in philosophy? The epistemological process. So heat model brings in that epistemological process into psychoanalysis. For example, if we are dealing with the Oedipus complex, so the child would see the parent of the opposite gender. And then what would happen? The sensations would come in. Stimuli would come in. Sensation would happen. Perception would happen. Conception would happen. Knowledge would happen. Action would happen. Or not happen. Okay. So this epistemology, if you can bring into the psychological phenomena, it allows you to deconstruct and understand the psychoanalytical phenomena in more fundamental terms. And then when you do that, you can more finely point out where is the problem. Instead of just saying there is a problem in the Oedipus, which obviously there is a problem in the Oedipus, but what led to that problem in the Oedipus? Can we go into the finer elemental issues because of which finally the Oedipus is in problem? Was it the interpretation of the parent of the same gender too difficult? Was it the libidinal drive towards the parent of the opposite gender too strong? Was the sensitivity very high? Was the affect regulation system not working? Why did finally a symptom come out? So we are deconstructing the macro psychoanalytic phenomena into its constituent variables. First into constituent processes and then into constituent variables. So this is how we make psychoanalysis more elemental by using this heat approach, by bringing in partly epistemology from philosophy and partly our own knowledge of psychology.
Okay, Himanshuji, what is the concept of the state and how is it important in the heat model?
We always talk about the state. When we talk about pathology, we often say, I am not in a good state and I want to be the normal state, which is the goal state. So we often ask the person to tell us, what is the state you are in? What are you feeling exactly? So the person says, I feel agitated, I feel anxious, I feel restless, I feel fearful, I feel gloomy, I feel sad. And we ask the person, what is the goal state you would like to be in? So the person says, I don't want these negative feelings, I want the positive feelings of happiness, confidence, joy, and so on. This is how they describe the state they want to be in. So psychological state description is very important because suddenly it makes it conscious to us what state we are in, what is active in us, and where we want to be and what we want to be active in us, and what we want to deactivate. And that is a very strong insight which is very good for healing of a person. Now this state analysis can be done much better if we describe the state in more elemental terms. And that can be done in heat using certain techniques. For example, uh, we can use the affect life cycle model to describe certain things, that I am in this state because of this. Or we can use the 6 categories of elementals to describe a state. Or we can use only the list of affects to describe a state. Or we can use existential root to describe a state. But description of a state as it is and description of the goal state is very important, because then you can map out your journey. And therefore the concept of description of a state as it is, the pathological state, and the goal state is very important, and the movement towards that is also important. Okay. Now this, in the most elemental form, if you do, in terms of the 7 category of elementals that I have described, the functional elementals, it becomes the most fundamental description, not most, but a very fundamental description that we can at present have, in a psychological sense, of course.
Okay. We have covered quite a lot about the structure of the heat model of the mind. Now, how does the holistic healing work in context of the heat model of the mind?
We can answer this in 2 ways. The heat model of the mind uh, accepts within its structure the 5 layers or 6 or 7 layers, however you put it. The physical layer, the energy layer, the uh, emotional layer, the mental layer, the karmic layer. And for each of the layers, what are the techniques available for healing? So if we want to heal, let us say the physical layer, we have pathies like allopathy, we have partly Ayurveda, we have Bhat Yoga. If we want to heal something which is anchored in the energy layer, we have Reiki, we have pranic healing, we have acupressure, we have acupuncture. If we want to heal something which is anchored in the emotional layer, we have psychoanalysis, we have ISTDP, we have homeopathy. We have emotion-centered therapy, we have psychodrama. If we want to heal something at the mental level, we have the cognitive psychotherapy, we have CT, we have CBT, we have DBT, we have REBT. We have positive thinking, we have logotherapy. If we want to do something at the karmic level, there are certain practices of pranic and reiki are useful, certain meditative techniques are useful, certain alchemical practices are useful, certain social work practices are useful. So one way heat gets into holistic healing is by accepting that there are 5 layers, and for each of the layer, we have many pathies, many options from which we can choose. And when we create a holistic healing plan for a person, we try to find out how each layer in the person can be healed. Of course, it is a necessity to heal. That is one way. The second way of using heat for holistic healing is this. We do elemental analysis of something and we find out what is most elemental. And we start healing that elemental. For example, let us say somebody is suffering from too much of repressed sadness. Somebody complains of depression, and we realize the depression is essentially because of repressed sadness. And when we go into it, how the sadness was generated. Suppose we say, we come to the conclusion that the sensitivity was too high, the stimulus in the environment was not so bad, but the sensitivity was too high. Then we can use the pranic healing and Reiki tools to address sensitivity. We can use cognitive therapy tools to address sensitivity. We can use behavioral tools to address sensitivity. So we don't stop by saying it is repressed sadness. We go into how it was generated. And in that generation process, what was the core element which was in trouble? So the moment we become elemental, we can use the holistic healing techniques to cure the basic elemental problem. That elemental variable, the trouble because of which started moving upwards, and now we have a problem at the level of phenomena. So the problem at the level of phenomena happens because essentially of problem at the level of elementals, which are at work and we result in the phenomena. So if we can go at the problem level of the problem of the elemental and use holistic healing techniques, we can do it in a much better and a faster way. And what I have realized is this, that for a variety of difficulties, sensitivity and negativity, these two elementals are at work for a large variety of problems. It's almost like doing panch karma, that regardless of which problem you are facing, the Ayurvedic doctor will just put you into panch karma for anything chronic. So I think if you look at an emotional panch karma kind of approach, we should be looking at sensitivity and negativity. That because of very high sensitivity, huge amount of effect is generated, both positive and negative. Positive does not cause trouble, but the negative does cause trouble. And at the root of catastrophic thinking is negativity. And catastrophic thinking is at the root of a large number of psychological problems. So if we just take these two elementals, sensitivity and negativity, and if you want to take the third, inferiority, powerlessness, if we just put all holistic healing efforts on these three in general, almost like an emotional panch karma kind of approach, a large variety of psychological problems can be provided relief, if not cure.
Okay. Now we have reached up till here. Now, how do you see your model developing in future in terms of operational terms?
Obviously, this is a model which is work in progress. It is not a complete model as yet. There are certain things which are yet to be completed. And I think I have made a very good beginning, but it needs a lot of development. Let me list out some of the areas that I see for future development. First is logical consistency. How can we explain the existing Kleinian psychoanalytic, Kleinian Freudian Jungian phenomena using this model? Two, how can we explain the disorders listed in DSM using this model? And I think both of them will be easy. I don't see much problem. Three, how do we empirically validate this? And this requires a lot of thought, because we will have to devise very innovative and very detailed experiments to really validate this point. Four, how do you integrate conceptually something which is there at present in a hazy way? And by that I refer to the 5 bodies that we are talking about and Sri Aurobindo's planes of consciousness and his concepts of the psychic representatives at the physical, emotional, mental levels. Because these elements are part of the model, but they still require some conceptual work for integration. For example, when we talk of the unconscious, collective unconscious and personal unconscious, and if you bring in the chakra element, does every chakra has its own separate unconscious, or is there one unconscious in which every chakra has its own sector? So are we looking at a spread out, decentralized unconscious, or are we looking at a consolidated unconscious? And yes, my model also has those gaps in the unconscious, the open spaces through which material can flow across one layer without interacting with material of that layer. So that also needs validation. Another important element is how do we bring in the epistemology in more complicated processes like projective identification and counter-transference and transference. And lastly, how do we evaluate the holistic healing, and particularly holistic healing directly applied to the roots in the most elemental forms? And then the question will be, can we change the most basic fundamental elementals of the personality? If somebody is born with some sensitivity, can we change that sensitivity? Can we refine the affect generation process, regulation process, so that symptom formation does not happen? And I personally am quite hopeful that if we apply adequate amount of thought and creativity within of the mainstream healing or holistic healing, we should find answers. So my belief is this is how the model will grow, and as it grows, it will also contribute immensely to the way holistic healing itself will work and lead to a lot of creativity and innovations in the zone of holistic healing also. So I see further of this, I see this going further as more of a 3-year work if somebody takes it up seriously.
So from what you said, it seems that holistic healing and the heat model of the mind kind of go hand in hand, and there is a lot of scope for both of them to develop in the future. Okay, Himanshuji, thank you so much for discussing this topic of the structure and the operational aspects of the model of the mind. In our next episode, we are looking forward to heat model part 3, which will discuss the relationships between determinism, free will, karma, self journey, and history in context of the heat model of the mind. Meanwhile, wait for our next episode and do write to us at hvindia@gmail.com. Thank you.